This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now. I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent. When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology, and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation.
I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm here with a very special guest, mainly special because he's had the patience to persevere with me trying to schedule this and failing for quite some time now. Josh from Cake and Arrow, how are you, sir? Good to have you on.
Yes, finally, we did it. Bound to happen.
And we
Way
did.
to start
We
off the
did.
new year.
Absolutely. And we're on the second report. We were going to talk about an old report, but anyway, I won't talk about my tardy timekeeping. Josh, pleasure to have you on. Lots of people in the industry will know who you are, but just for those that aren't aware, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself and obviously Cake and Arrow.
Of course. So, yeah, I'm Josh Levine. I'm the founder here at and CEO here at Cake and Arrow. I'm personally a designer by trade, which means I've kind of always approached problems through that human-centered and user experience focused lens, and that is actually what brought me into insurance, just being an industry that, as most people know, historically hasn't been very um, design or people focused, in its DNA. So about 20 years ago, I started Cake and Arrow to bring that perspective into insurance in a more intentional way. So what we do is we're an experience design and product innovation firm. So we focus exclusively on the insurance industry. So we'll partner with carriers, with distributors, with insurtechs to help them ultimately design better experiences across the entire insurance life cycle. So that starts early, sometimes with deep research into understanding understanding the people's needs. And by people, I mean could be customers, could be agents, brokers, underwriters, could be employees, operations folks, right? And all that's to uncover new, business and product opportunities. And then from there, we design and improve digital products and services. And that could be things like quoting and policyholder claims experiences, agent and broker tools. We do a lot of work with a lot in the benefit space with benefits and HR portals, all the way through kind of complex enterprise platforms like underwriting, workbenches, and policy admin systems. So yeah, we also help organizations scale their product design capabilities
Mhm.
internally, right? Just bringing more human-centered ways of thinking into how their teams build and ship and evolve products over time. But I'd say essentially our goal is to do what we can to help the industry use design to make the buying, selling, servicing insurance better for everyone. And I'd say the underlying belief, and you and I have spoken about this really, is that the companies that can truly understand and serve the people both inside and outside their organizations, those are going to be the ones that ultimately differentiate and grow. And then I was just telling you, beyond the client work, we do invest heavily in our own proprietary research and which we publish openly and for free. And it's kind of our way of giving back and helping the industry kind of move forward to becoming more human centered. So some of the Gen Z research we'll probably touch on today is came in directly out of that effort.
Yeah, amazing. It's so important, and I think when I think about insurance and when I think about the bad reputation, both as like just being boring. I mean, it's so funny. I met someone that I went to university with, and I hadn't spoken to this person for 20 years, and they were like, "What are you doing now?" And I was like, "Oh, I do headhunting and insurance technology." and the glaze over of the eyes was just there to all to see. And it's there is a difficult task of getting people to fall in love with it. It's this ubiquitous thing. It's a grudge purchase a lot of the time. Um, but that user experience is that opportunity and that design and that kind of human-centric approach inside and outside um, is how we're going to get these people to fall in love with insurance. And we will touch on this. I mean, I think I spoke to you when we first met. Is that the talk I've done the most is about treating talent as a customer. And I always
Yeah,
talk about customer journeys and their customer journey to like try and find a role at your company, or as in anyone's
and
company, is usually so difficult and so hard. So even if you wanted to work for this company, and I always randomly just pull up I'll get someone to shout an insurance company. I go, right, find the careers page,
yeah,
then find out how to apply. And there's like so many click throughs and things, just things like that. And you go, it's difficult to get someone to fall in love when the experience is that poor. So crucial stuff. Um, I wanted to ask you a few more bits about sort of the work at KKR, and then I do want to dive into this report quite heavily.
yep,
You know, what has evolved in what your clients are asking for now? Because obviously you were at the forefront of digital experiences and trying to
yeah.
shape those. How's that changed in the last couple of years? Is there any significant sort of trends that you've spotted, or because I imagine the drive in insurtech has driven kind of a need to improve design and experience. But is there any kind of like overarching themes that you've observed?
Yeah, yeah, we've been at it a while. I would say what I've seen the past few years is, like there's that big push to people getting these big 5-year, 2-year core implementations in place and,
Hmm.
getting their agent portals and all that. I think now that they've been implemented and starting to get out in market, a lot of the phone calls we've been getting is it's not working. It's not working
Hmm.
as well as
Yeah.
we thought. And we thought, agents or customers that it would increase, do things better. And frankly, it's not. So the beauty of that in terms of where we sit in the market is generally when the humans, a customer, an employee is a priority, that's when we're busy, right? When tech first, policy first, business first is the priority, then typically that is where we see the lulls. The good thing is the past year, it has been busy, which generally indicates that it's good. That means there is an emphasis being put on the user experience, the employee experience. To your point, Alex, what you just said about um, the talent and that being a user experience. It's the same with employee experience. Like to me, we
Yeah.
always say everyone talks about customer experience, how the employees engage, the tools they have, the ways they work are that's the thing that drives a great customer experience. So we're also seeing a lot of what used to be probably, which makes sense, 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of direct consumer work. Now it's probably shifted for us to a lot more design being focused on internal operations. You heard me say underwriting workbenches and sales
Mm-hmm.
enablement and all that, which is great because from a design perspective, if there's an area that has not been where the user and the human hasn't been factored in, it's been the internal facing tools. So that's a
Mm.
wonderful trend both for your world and my world, but lots of stuff going on. Obviously AI and the obviously a lot of upside there. The flip side we see from a design and experience level is a lack of adoption and
Mm.
stuff like that. But again, that could be a whole separate chat. But good things happening the past year.
Yeah,
Other
yeah,
trends.
yeah. I think the design thing is on the internal user experience, the adoption thing. I mean, I you know, if anyone's seeing on video, they'll be able to tell that I recorded a podcast about an hour earlier on a separate topic, and it was about BPOs because I'm wearing a quite distinctive top. But we were talking about like adoption and ease of adoption, and you know, I think it's so overlooked. Like it really is. I mean, the amount of times that I get something thrust upon me, and speaking plainly, we have an internal HR tool for the team,
Yeah,
manage their holidays, manage their kind of investments, etc. It's so difficult to use that no one uses it. And that
right.
includes me. And we pay for this thing and it's going, oh, it can do all this. And when I phone the team, they sort of beat me over the head about, oh, you've just got to learn how to use it this way. And I just think I don't really. in this day and age, I've used many of these systems before. If it's not relatively intuitive, then it's just not very good.
You-
Um,
You've used these systems before and you've used it in your personal life, like
yeah,
too. And you, like all of the younger generation, which we'll talk about, they have these expectations. So you said the words thrust
yeah,
onto me. That
yeah, yeah,
is the inherent issue with internal tools and digital
mm,
experiences of that's just not how humans work. That's why
yeah,
we get these phone calls. You can't
yeah.
just um, spend all these years on a new platform and flick a switch and say, hi, 1,000 people use this. It just
It's not how it
that
works.
doesn't work. And you can't base it on assumption of what might have worked for you as a business, or if
Mm,
you used to be an agent. Now, okay, that's going to
hmm.
work for, all these folks now. It's just that it's different. And people, unfortunately, the concept of assumptions is very expensive.
Yeah.
When you say, this is what they need. I know what they need. I know what our
Mm,
operations folks, I know what the adjusters need, and it's not. And you see a
mm,
dip in a lot of money spent only to see a dip in adoption. But it's human.
mm,
It's human change management. And back to your point, it's people, new hires, you name it, they have high expectations
mhm,
for the tools they use on a day-to-day basis. And like I said before, that is if we're going to improve the quote unquote customer experience for insurance,
mhm.
you got to improve the employee
Yeah,
experience, the tools they use, and all that. So yeah,
yeah. No, brilliant stuff. Well, you did these two reports, and one was essentially Gen Z in relation to
yeah,
insurance and their attitude towards it, and then one was about working in insurance. Is a rough summary, and people
yeah.
should go check these things out. As Josh said, they're free to access and really valuable stuff. Talk to me about what about insurance is not resonating with Gen Z today? Because it seems to be, yeah, it's a lack of excitement about it or lack of resonance to them.
Yeah, I mean, uh, one thing that did stand out in the research, I think a lot of people are, the assumption is they're not they're disengaged or disinterested in insurance. And sure, that's true, but the underlying reality that we found is that they're just living in like a different reality than the one insurance was built for, if that makes sense, right? And if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, they've come of age in a world that is ultimately, as we speak, defined by instability, right? Again, we know it, rising costs and the climate disruption and all the political division and all the rapid tech change, especially with AI, and they still want the same things the previous generations did with
Mm-hmm.
stability, home, right, family,
Mm-hmm.
financial foundation. But the traditional path to get there feels absolutely broken to
Yeah.
them. And the reality is when the system, in this case insurance, doesn't feel built for you, you start to build workarounds, and that's why some of the trends we see and the industry sees, right, is people are coming up with kind of emergency funds instead of leaning on coverage, and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot more of the side hustles instead of coming up with these long-term personal finance plans, right? Leaning on Reddit,
Mm.
YouTube, rather than you know leaning on their financial advisors or brokers. And the irony of it
Mm.
all, and we saw this, is, and it makes sense, it's logical, right? That Gen Z are more risk aware than than ever. The issue is they just don't see insurance as part of the solution. And in the research, we kind of saw really nearly all of them agreed that insurance provides protection, but none of them felt that it was worth the money. And I think the implication of that is pretty clear. And when it comes to Gen Z as customers, what we say, like to reach them, insurers need to stop leading with products and start leading a
Mm.
little more with relevance and
Mm.
trust. And that means reframing, the insurance as tools for resilience and not just coverage. And really, what we were saying earlier, meet them where they are, whether that's through their platforms, through their peers, the people they trust. And so I'd say one takeaway, one high level takeaway is if
Mm.
you want to reach Gen Z, and you got to stop asking, how do we sell to them, and really start thinking about how do we support them, and that's
Mm.
where the opportunity. But short answer is to what's not resonating. It isn't we were talking about this. It isn't the boring, right? That to
Mm,
me, we got to get past that. The short answer is trust.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
happy to expand on that too, because that was a big topic.
yeah.
And James.
I mean, even as you were talking, it was one of these things you don't engage with enough. And I was just thinking about, and I'm sure this, the relevance was you've got a career that you could rely on. You knew the trajectory of that. I think about my father worked at the same company for nearly 50 years, and
Yeah,
just like progression pathway. Um, and therefore you would buy a home at a certain point, you would have certain risks in your life that were quite predictable. And if you're not buying your first home till you're nearly 40 because it's so unaffordable, which is the
yeah,
case particularly in the UK, well, you're not going to particularly engage with insurance. People live in cities, don't buy cars. There's a really late entry point to joining the world of insurance, as it were, as well. Is that kind
yeah,
of in that sort of
100%.
yeah, that feels
100%. It was like
yeah,
from a design and empathy perspective. I mean, like we consistently heard from Gen Z that many of the insurance products, like you just said, are built around life stages that
yeah.
feel distant and or unrealistic to
Mm,
them. So yeah, life insurance, right? Think about that. It's when you
yeah.
have kids. Homeowners insurance is for when you go and buy a house. But I think as those milestones get delayed or redefined altogether, those products start to feel out of sync with Gen Z realities. And that's why you see products like pet renters insurance, right? They're often what we saw and hear is showing up as kind of Gen Z's more positive insurance experiences, and because they're simple and they're affordable, they're easy to understand, they're relevant. So to your point, I do think, from a design perspective and product design, not just digital, right? The insurance needs to recognize that unlike previous generations, which is a majority of the industry, the path to adulthood is no
Mm,
longer this linear path, and that means building flexibility into some of the core products, especially traditional ones like life insurance,
mm,
where the
mm,
value is typically framed as a payout at the end of life. To your point, how do you start to create products that adapt over time and maybe feel relevant
mm,
at different stages? So it's back to what I said. There's the opportunity to kind of reposition insurance as a source of resilience and something like that naturally would start to link into how they already think about stability. And I think when that happens, insurance will start to feel less like an obligation, and more like a smarter kind of proactive financial decision, which fits into their financial playbook, if you will.
yeah. Yeah, it resonates with me. I mean, a couple of my team members are quite not in their early to mid twenties, and I'd say they're like financially very astute. They're very concerned about long term, like they're investing in their pensions quite heavily, and
Oh
some
yeah.
of the long term, the insurance isn't part of it. And bear in mind, we understand insurance, we work in it, and it's quite interesting for me. However, they do engage with, like all of them have their mobile phones insured, where like I probably don't. I'm sort of old school and I have it under, or I might have it. I mean, obviously I do through work, but I think previously I might have had other things through my home insurance, but because I don't have home insurance. So yeah, it's building the insurance environment that actually is going to engage people because it's relevant to them. And there's a lack, it seems like a lack of relevance. I wanted to jump onto this, the other part of what you were looking at as well. So
Yep.
the talent pipeline from Gen Z,
Yeah.
because we talk about that huge amount. I get asked about this all the time, but you've
Yeah.
actually, rather than just pontificate, you've actually done some research. So that's quite good to know. So what should like the leaders in the insurance industry understand about that Gen Z talent pipeline?
Yeah, and even before I jump into your point, and me and you kind of cross paths often at these conferences, it's like
Mm,
it's all people talk about, right? And it is a
yeah.
relevant topic, right? Of younger generation, X amount of people retiring. How do we
Mm, mm,
refill
mm,
that? But you don't hear enough about, okay, how and what are people thinking, right? It's all
mm, mm.
these kind of high level views. So that's what drove us to do this work in the first place. We too, as some of us are, not me, as a Gen Xer, but again, most of our office, like what you were saying, millennials and some Gen Z, and they too want to understand what you know, kind of get an objective view. And I think the core takeaway is that first of all, the talent is there, right? The industry just has not made a compelling case for itself, right? So
hmm
one
hmm
of the stats, I think only 13% of the Gen Z that we surveyed said they were even in, which makes sense, in what they would call a career job, and we know a lot of the younger folks, it's not easy as it
mm,
used to be to get a job, particularly at that level. So, you know, many of them are just, especially ones with jobs, they're motivated, they're ambitious, they're actively looking for something better. So the problem isn't supply. It is kind of perception and how they
mm,
experience insurance. So, and I want to see if a couple of these resonate with you. I mean, like a couple of the key opportunities that um, that we uncovered, some are obvious ones, right? Of like offering real flexibility, right? The reality is Gen Z sees um, insurance as the 9 to 5 in the office kind of job, rigid and office bound and outdated. So hybrid, remote, even flexible schedules would immediately modernize some of that perception. Another big one was creating more dynamic career paths. So,
hmm
unsurprisingly, Gen Z views the industry or insurance as very traditional, very hierarchical. Um, and the insight, I think, was that, and it's true, right, where advancement is much more about bureaucracy than it is merit. And this generation wants to be recognized for their abilities and advance quickly if they show um, potential. So things like whether it's accelerated leadership or management programs, right? Something that signals that the industry rewards initiative and ambition and not
mm,
just tenure. I think the
hmm
message should be if you perform, you're going to grow fast here. And that's not how the this generation sees it. And the other, again, I want your take on this too, is making the purpose more visible. They don't need to save the world, right? That kind of perception is gone and unrealistic, but they do want work that matters and know what they do has a purpose, which to
mm,
me resonates with insurance, right? So, that could mean helping people understand their coverage, basic things like making informed decisions, right? Finding financial security. It's like I think about agents and brokers, right? That would mean like reframing the role as not just like as salespeople hitting quotas, but
mm,
as guides helping people navigate financial risk and stability. So, I mean, I think the bottom line um, is Gen Z definitely wants meaningful, flexible work, and I think if insurance can start to evolve and its culture and its story, there's a deep bench of talent ready to engage and kind of build this
mm,
next chapter we're all working towards. But
mm.
the industry is going to have to do some reshaping of its image, which I'm happy to chat about as well.
Yeah, I think the messaging around the flexibility and not, I know it wasn't just flexibility and advancement. I think what's such an open goal that we've missed there is that that's actually my experience of insurance. Um, you do see people that are you're put in front of, I think about, I worked in claims and I didn't work in claims for very long, but I was stuck in front of a massive client, Harrods actually. I think I can say that now. It's 20 odd years ago, but
Yeah.
Harrods and at the time Harrods was much bigger. It had its own actually had its own private airline, so it was quite a big, interesting risk. I sat in front of Harrods insurance and risk team, dealing with them 6 months into my career. Quite a high profile engagement, and I think underwriting's similar, broking similar. We don't talk about how you really get in the thick of it pretty early. Like that's and not all businesses are like that, particularly because it's a face-to-face business as well. So there's a lot of kind of really active engagement with people that are very
Yeah.
senior to you. And then, I think we're bad at democratizing fast track. We do, I do see, which I think is bad. You do see these people that are plucked from someone on high, who's taken a liking to them, and then they get pushed through to this, usually this sort of EA type role, so, sitting and shadowing a senior leader. But again,
Yeah.
but we do it, and we have, and in the industry there are some very, very, very young CEOs and C-suite people and leaders. I mean, it was in the news. I think it was Zurich, one of their regional leaders in the UK, big patch, is 28, and they've just been given this role. So I
Yeah.
just think we do a really bad job of sharing that, particularly because I think it's there, and it's a bit like the mission. I think the mission stuff is harder because if you don't understand insurance, then it becomes harder to understand that mission. But I think if we get the first bit right and we get more new entrants to the market, they're your biggest cheerleaders. You know, get these Gen Z people into the industry, get them enjoying themselves, get them promoted quickly, get them engaged quickly. Then the best
Yep.
thing that can happen is they're close to that next bucket of talent and they can keep talking to them. But, you know, if we don't do step one, we can't even worry about mission because we haven't got enough people to share that mission anyway.
And a big thing that gets in the way, and this came through clearly in the research in terms of articulating that mission and making it resonate, is, the
Yeah.
it should go without saying, and our research validated, is that the industry with younger generations right now has a pretty bad trust
Mm.
issue, like I was saying. So if you think about
Yeah.
it, and we saw this, Gen Z has seen, and is related to claims, too many examples of insurance not showing up where it matters
Yeah.
most. In our research, that's it, right? Bad claims experiences come up again and again, and they
Yeah.
dominate the perception. You can't discount um, some of the high profile events that shape these views, right? Situations like the LA wildfires.
Hmm.
Those played out very publicly,
Hmm.
especially
Hmm.
online. And Gen Z, it's clear that they're seeing those stories. They saw those stories in real time, and they're paying
Hmm.
attention, and they're taking note. And related in the research, I think 11 of the 12 interviewees said that they believe insurance companies will more or less do whatever they can to deny a claim. I believe only one said they think insurance is worth um, every penny. But I think the interesting part, right, is the most of them agreed with the statement that insurance protects my family, so that they understand the purpose of insurance. They just don't trust the system to deliver that promise, or or feel like they're getting value for what they pay. And that to me is the real disconnect, right? The industry
Hmm.
keeps this idea of protection and
Hmm.
stability. I think until insurers rebuild trust, whether that's by being more transparent, fair, right, or human, and how they show up when it matters, right, and talk about that, promote
Hmm.
that, right, the gap isn't going to close. I think what it comes down to, and this to me is probably the most telling um, insight, which came through rather clearly, that when Gen Z holds these perceptions as consumers, right, buyers, it starts to shape how they see the industry as a place to work. And if they don't trust insurance to do right by people, they're unlikely to want to have a career in it, right?
Yeah.
That's it's kind of it makes sense when you look at it through that lens, and that
Mm.
serves through both reports, right? Understanding the perspective of Gen Z as a customer and how they see the industry, and then following
Hmm.
that up with research of, well, how do they view this as a career? There's a it's I mean, naturally there's a lot of overlap between the two, and that's something that's driving a lot of this.
Mm. I think the transparent point I wanted to pick up on, I think the
Yep.
wildfires is a perfect example of that because insurers are not, they don't put themselves out there. And I understand the risk for that. And I don't, I'm not a crisis PR person, clearly.
Yep.
I'd be a terrible crisis PR person.
Same.
But there's something around that, those sorts of incidents happen. And the news is always, and the online chat is going, oh, uh, insurers are denying claims. Well, firstly, it groups everyone together and says insurers are just denying all claims, where some might have lean towards that. Some will be like paying everything as much as quickly as possible and everything in between. So there's never enough attempt to sort of differentiate company A from company B. But then also there is just a lack of like commentary on this stuff, and there is always something, but it's never enough. And I just think that lack of transparency. And I'll give you not a non-claims example. So I was just sent my renewal for my household insurance. It's gone up relatively significantly, but not a lot. And
Same.
now I was thinking the letter they sent me, and they sent me a letter, which always makes me laugh because I don't get letters anymore. Um, but it got up. They didn't really explain why or how. And it was essentially like, oh, this is your new renewal quote. And I thought, if my quote's gone up, I thought that letter could be addressed. Hi, Alex. Unfortunately, your
Yes.
premium's gone up. Here's why. Um, hope you understand. You know, like even like the tone. And I know that's a little bit too. That's probably too. Uh, I don't know, accommodating for me, but just did feel there was
No,
just sort of this lack of understanding that why aren't you explaining yourself? Because if you did, I'd probably go, fair enough. Whereas actually what happens is my friends all moan about it. And because I work in insurance, I feel the need to defend insurance for the next
of
like
course. Same, same.
10
It's
minutes.
funny. What you said resonates, and it came through so clearly in the first, and it's humans, right? So it's amazing that when people talk about starting to shift the customer experience, that we got to get new platforms and it's going to be a 5-year initiative. What you just described came through clearly, which is, first of all, and this is a year ago when we started doing some of this research, fresh
Mm,
out of a lot of the wildfire stuff. Of people get it, they know prices are going to go up. The exact attitude, Alex, that you just shared is the sentiment out there of,
really.
I get it, I know stuff is going to come up. All I ask is that you communicate with me with a claim or whatever it might be, or like I said, renewals. I don't want to have to come after you if you give me the bad news. Just be straight with me. So to
Yeah,
your
yeah,
point,
yeah.
think about that moment you just brought up of a piece of paper or an email, whatever it is. Um, the result of that is a taste in your brain, but even more so, it might be a phone call to get
Yeah.
clarity. That that is bad business, bad operations, right? Like that
Mm,
those calls add up. We see that all the time, but these
mm,
aren't big changes. Comms, like it isn't a huge, 5-year change. There's little things that could be done that will have a huge impact. And a lot of it has to do with transparency and communication. And this is where it becomes like, again, whether you're Gen Z or not, that mindset of I get it, I'm a
mm,
realist.
mm.
That's the feeling. So once you start to kind of understand that, maybe you could the industry can start to prioritize smaller wins rather than kind of big, huge, replatforming our claims process. There's a lot of um, other methods and tactics that can be applied, but I appreciate, again, it's as if I set you up to say that because
No,
that's
no, no,
exactly
no.
what was the sentence.
No,
True.
yeah, I was there. I could tell the podcast audience. It's like I did not know that information at all. It's making me smile. It's
Yeah.
funny though, because I think that even from a business development perspective. So if I take it out of insurance and I talk about, we're seeing like response rates drop on things like email, response
Yeah.
rates drop on, also we use LinkedIn a lot. On LinkedIn, people are getting hammered by this stuff. Um, and but what's gone up? People's willingness to meet us for coffee. Like,
Yeah.
letters. Like I've written a letter for a few people. Just went, can't get hold of you. Really admire your business. Would love to talk to you a bit more. And like honestly, like personalization. And I mean it. It's with
Yeah.
sincerity. I don't send it to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. That's why. Yeah, otherwise I'd be writing letters all day. And but it really made me think about this moment where going, if they just apologized for a policy going up and then explained why, I wouldn't have any problem with it. Um, I'm conscious of time actually, Jocelyn. There's so much to go on, but I thought you've got there's a really important thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is
Yeah.
this. We can't have a podcast without talking about AI, so obviously we're
Of
going to
course.
have to.
Of course.
So what role is AI playing in this game? So like whether it's employee experience and talent attraction, because
Yeah. Yeah.
that seems to be something that you touched on as well.
Yeah, well, we have a whole different view, particularly because a lot of this, like you said, the talent and all that is top of mind. But
Hmm.
one of the more positive things that I think has come out of a lot of the industry conversations around AI, especially obviously Gen AI,
Hmm.
is this renewed focus on employee experience. So as companies
Mm.
rethink how their internal systems and processes need to work for this kind of AI enabled future, they're being forced, which is great, to confront how outdated their tools and their fragmented systems and manual workflows are creating poor experiences for their employees, which they're seeing inevitably cascades down to customers. So I think the industry is actually, because of this, finally recognizing that improving the employee experience isn't a nice to have. That they're seeing, again, back to you asked, what trends am I seeing and investing in design and all that. I think, when you empower, they're realizing when you empower people with the better tools and the better data and better systems, and they're more effective and more engaged and better equipped to serve customers, whether that's underwriting, sales, operations, whatever it is. And it's especially true for what we see. We're doing a lot of agent and broker work, especially true for them, right? They're only as effective as the information and the systems they have access to. And like I said, when those experiences improve, everyone wins, right? So you get employees that feel more empowered, and you get customers that are getting better outcomes, and ultimately the industry becomes a more attractive place to build a career. So that to me is what gives me more optimism, actually. When people ask about AI, it's not the technology itself. I think it's the impact it's having on a lot of insurers to rethink and reimagine. And as you know, and I know you deal probably more, I think, with kind of more in the insure tech space, particularly when it comes to a lot of these carriers. There's numbers out there. You probably have these better than I do, but younger generation will not tolerate old, dated tools. That's why I think we see a lot of people see insurance as a transition job, right? They're coming in and then they're going for their real career. They just can't, they won't tolerate working on that. They, like we said earlier, have expectations of the kinds of tools they use to manage their finances and manage their to-do list and all that. And again, so back to AI, it's the impact it's having. It's a
Mm.
very healthy and a good thing, and I'm happy it's happening.
Yeah, I did a talk on AI and AI in talent quite recently in New York just before Christmas, and one of the things that was some of the data was coming through that people were judging companies on the tools that they were given to use, and it was seen as a marker of like progression of the industry and like and therefore how likely their career was to be succeed. Because if you see your business adopting like the forefront of technology, there's a built-in confidence that they're going to move with the times and go with it. And to your point, I think that's a reason to be hopeful. And I think where
Sure.
insurance have got an ability to kind of fight back against maybe talent we would have lost in the past to whether it be social media platforms, whether it been like things like investment banking, um, there's a chance to win here. Because if we adopt the new technology at a faster rate, then insurance becomes the more interesting place to work because you're at the bleeding edge of the technology front. And there's no reason why it can't be. It just hasn't been in the past. So I'm kind of I'm quite buoyed by that. I think it's an open goal that we've got. Yeah, the money's there. The sort of tenure of an industry is there. Insurance isn't going anywhere, and we can adopt all these tools. And I think that's an opportunity to win big with particularly Gen Z. But I think, with
Everyone,
anyone really, that you just
anyone.
feel more secure. I mean, I look at my business and, when 20 years ago, I literally was given a phone book and said, phone everyone that works in insurance. We had some sort of rudimentary system, and now the stuff that we're using now it blows my mind. It's and some of it's good, some of it's bad. But I know that my team are constantly thirsty and hungry for like, what's next? What's going to help us out? And they're not trying to be lazy. They're like, how can we do more? And are you going to give me the tools? And as much as anything as well, it's about exploring it. They respect if I don't buy it because they might not think it's worth it, but they want to know that I'm looking at these things. And I think again, insurance needs to look at itself and go, it's not necessarily about wholesale change. It's
Yeah.
about being brave enough to at least explore these things with your team and then explain again, explain why you haven't chosen to adopt it if you don't.
Yeah, I think you bring up a very important point. It's not just recruiting new talent, it's retaining
Mm,
existing of all um,
mm,
ages. And again, more and more people just want to be, including right, the younger generation, but also millennials and so on,
Hmm.
they want to feel creative and empowered. And like I said earlier, they want to see the impact of their work. And that's going to require a culture of learning and experimentation and giving kind of younger talent permission to test and to iterate and to help modernize these tools and the workflows. So to your point, they when they come in, you don't need perfection.
Hmm.
Let them be a part of the evolution of it, right? That progress, right? Because it goes back to the boring factor, right? I mean, like think about it. You mentioned bleeding edge. Um, what there's no other like the floor, no one everyone knows what the floor is, it's pretty, low, the ceiling's high, the floor is low. That's a lot of opportunity, and if we can be on the bleeding edge of allowing change and innovation, I mean, it's why I'm in this industry. It's why I love it as a designer. Everyone's like, what the heck are you, designer, doing in this industry? And it's like, man, there's a lot of hard, complex problems that need to be solved. And I want to be a part of, that fill in that gap. And that's a big gap, bigger than most industries. And we need everyone else to be
Mm.
as excited about it as you and I and your employees are. And we got a good thing, and onward.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's an opportunity to create enthusiasm as well, and I think that's always kind of worth doing. And I'm always mindful that I sit here and like I've got a very small business. It's really easy for me to kind of communicate with my team and get them enthusiastic. But just because things are hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do them. Josh, we're at time. I knew we would
Okay.
be, and there's I could ask 50 more questions about this report.
Yes.
I would urge everyone to visit cakeandarrow.com. Josh's business. It's really easy. There's a pop-up comes up if you want to download this report, so you can get it. You can get access to it, and you can get access to both of those reports on there. It's really, really good reading. And bear in mind that we talk about talent and Gen Z all the time. When someone's taken the time to do the research and provide you with the data, take the opportunity to go and read it. So do that. Uh, Josh, always a pleasure. Always good to see
Yes.
you, and thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, let's do it again. You tell me where and when, I'll be there.
Fabulous. Thank you, my
Bye,
friend.
Alex.
Take care.
Thank you.